She found it on a Tuesday, not a Monday when the week is fresh and the mind is sharp. A Tuesday. The kind of quiet, unremarkable morning where nothing is supposed to happen. Josephine had been cleaning Victor Crane's private floor for 4 months, and in 4 months, nothing had ever been out of place. Every surface exactly where he left it. Every document face down. Every drawer closed. Victor Crane was a man who controlled his environment the way other men controlled their breathing, without thinking about it, without stopping, without ever letting it slip. But that Tuesday morning, the door to his private study was open. Not wide open, just slightly. 2 inches. The kind of open that happens when someone leaves in a hurry and does not pull it all the way closed behind them. Josephine stood in the hallway with her cart and looked at that door for a long moment. In 4 months, she had never touched that door, never been asked to clean that room. She had assumed it was locked. She had never tried it. She was not the kind of woman who tried doors that were not meant for her. She was the kind of woman who kept her head down and did her job and went home and sat in the quiet of her apartment and tried not to think about Marcus. She always ended up thinking about Marcus. She pushed her cart past the door. She went back to the linen closet. She pulled fresh towels from the shelf. She stood there holding them for 40 seconds. Then she set them down, walked back to the study, pushed the door open with 2 fingers, and stepped inside. The room smelled like old paper and cedar wood. One wall was entirely books, and one wall was entirely glass overlooking the city 40 floors below. In the center of the room was a desk, and on the desk, open, was a file. She almost did not look at it. She looked at it. The file had a name on the tab, a company name, Meridian Logistics, and below that, a date, 3 years ago, and below that, a photograph of an accident report, a car, a specific intersection, a specific night, the night Marcus died. Josephine's hands went completely still. She stood in that room for 6 minutes without moving. Then she closed the file, walked out of the study, pulled the door back to its 2-inch gap, went to the bathroom at the end of the hall, sat on the edge of the tub, and pressed both hands over her mouth so the sound that came out of her would not travel through the walls. Now, before we go any further, if you are already feeling something in your chest right now, you are exactly where this story needs you. Subscribe and hit the bell, because what happens next between Josephine and Victor Crane will change the way you think about secrets, grief, and what happens when 2 broken people finally stop pretending. Stay with me. Victor Crane was 41 years old, and he had been cold for so long he had forgotten it was a choice. He had not always been this way. There were people alive who remembered a younger Victor, warmer, quicker to laugh, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order and asked about your mother. But that version of him had been carefully and methodically packed away after the company crisis 3 years ago that cost him 40% of his net worth, his marriage, and the respect of people he had considered friends. He had rebuilt the money. He had not rebuilt anything else. He ran Crane Holdings from the top 2 floors of a building he owned in downtown Manhattan. He lived on the 40th floor of the same building. He had a staff of 4, a driver, a chef, a personal assistant, and a maid. All 4 had signed NDAs. All 4 knew better than to speak to him unless spoken to. All 4 were paid extremely well to maintain that understanding. The maid before Josephine had lasted 6 days. The one before that, 11. Victor was not cruel to his staff. He was simply so completely indifferent to their presence that most people found it unbearable after a short time. He looked through people the way you look through a window, registering only what was on the other side. Oh, Josephine had lasted 4 months. He noticed this without meaning to. He noticed it the way you notice a sound that stops, not while it is happening, but in the sudden quiet of its absence. He had expected her to quit by week 3. She had not. He had walked past her in the hallway one morning and done what he always did, looked straight through her, and she had done something none of his previous staff had done. She had looked straight through him back, not rudely, not pointedly, simply with the complete absence of need. She did not want his approval. She did not want his attention. She did not want anything from him at all. And Victor Crane, who had spent 3 years protecting himself from people who wanted things from him, found that he did not know what to do with a person who wanted nothing. He started noticing small things, the way she moved through his space without disturbing it, the way she never left a single thing out of place, the way she was always already finished with a room before he expected her to be. She was precise the way professionals were precise, not trained precision, but internalized, the kind that lives in the body and does not require thought. He asked Patricia, his assistant, about her. Patricia said, "Her name is Josephine Adler, 34, excellent references, very quiet." Where did she work before? 2 private estates in Boston. Before that, she was in a different field entirely. What field? Patricia hesitated. She didn't say, and her references didn't mention it. I didn't push. Victor looked at her. Or why not? Because she was the only applicant who didn't spend the entire interview trying to impress you, Patricia said simply. I thought that was worth something. Victor said nothing. He went back to his office. He thought about that for longer than he would admit. He did not see Josephine again until Thursday of that week, when he came home earlier than expected and found her in the kitchen at the counter. She was not cleaning. She was sitting very still with both hands wrapped around a cup of tea, staring at the surface of the liquid. She did not hear him come in. He stood in the doorway for 3 full seconds, watching her face. She was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere far away and clearly not peaceful. He cleared his throat. She came back fast, stood up. The cup went to the sink. I'm sorry. I was just finishing. Sit down, he said. She looked at him. I said, sit down. It's a kitchen. You're allowed to sit in it. She sat back down slowly, watching him the way careful people watch unpredictable things. He went to the coffee maker, made himself a cup, stood at the counter across from her and looked at her properly for the first time in 4 months. You look like something happened, he said. I'm fine. I didn't ask if you were fine. I said you look like something happened. She was quiet for a moment. I found out something today that I wasn't expecting to find out. About what? She looked at her tea. About why my husband died. The kitchen went very still. Victor set his cup down. Your husband. 3 years ago. Car accident. The other driver ran a red light on a wet road and hit him at full speed. She said it the way people say things they have said many times. Not because it is easy, but because repetition has worn the sharpest edges down just enough to survive. They said it was just an accident. Wrong place, wrong time, terrible luck. She paused. I believed that for 3 years. Victor said nothing. He was watching her face. I don't believe it anymore, she said quietly. The silence stretched between them. Outside, 40 floors below, the city moved and made no sound through the glass. What do you believe now? Victor said. She looked up at him. Her eyes were steady and dark and carrying something enormous. I believe the company that owned that other driver's vehicle knew their driver had a suspended license, and let him drive anyway. I believe there was a delivery that night that could not wait. I believe someone decided a deadline was worth more than the rules. And I believe that company has been very careful for 3 years to make sure nobody looked too closely at that night. Victor's jaw tightened. What company? Meridian Logistics, she said. The coffee cup in Victor's hand was very still. He knew that name. He knew it the way you know a scar, not because you look at it every day, but because it is part of the map of your body and you always know where it is. Meridian Logistics, a subsidiary, a small one that had been dissolved quietly 18 months ago after the crisis. One whose files were in a box in his private study that he had never fully gone through, because going through them meant sitting inside the worst year of his life, for however long it took, and he had not been ready. He was not ready now either. But Josephine was looking at him with eyes that had stopped pretending 3 years ago, and he understood suddenly, with complete and terrible clarity, that she had been in his study. She had seen the file. She had seen the name and the date and the photograph, and she had carried it through the rest of her working day in silence. And she was sitting here now, not asking him for anything. Not an explanation, not an apology, not even a reaction. She was simply being honest, because she was a woman who had run out of the energy required to be anything else. Josephine, he said. Oh, I'm not accusing you of anything, she said. I want to be clear about that. I know. I just need to know what was in that file. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Victor Crane, who ate every meal alone at a table for 12, sat down across from his maid and looked at her straight and did not look away. Meridian was a subsidiary I acquired 7 years ago, he said. I didn't run it directly. I had a management team. 3 years ago, during the company audit, we found irregularities, falsified driver certifications, routes being run with unqualified drivers to meet delivery windows. When I found out, I shut it down. Immediately. But it took me 4 weeks to find out. 4 weeks where those drivers were still on the road. Josephine was completely still. The accident report, he said. The one in that file. And I found it 8 months after Marcus died. My legal team flagged it during the dissolution process. The driver who hit your husband, his license had been suspended for 60 days. Meridian knew. The route manager knew. They flagged it internally and ran the delivery anyway because the client contract had a penalty clause for late delivery. The word penalty landed in the room like something physical. I have spent 2 years trying to find a way to make that right, Victor said. His voice was steady, but underneath it was something that sounded like a man who has been carrying a weight for so long he has forgotten what it felt like before. My lawyer said any direct contact with you could be construed as an admission of liability. I was advised, strongly, to stay away. So you stayed away, Josephine said. Oh, yes. And you hired me not knowing who I was. I hired you not knowing who you were. She looked at him for a long time. The tea in her cup had gone cold. The city outside was starting to darken. Neither of them moved toward a light switch. Do you know what the hardest part was? She said. Not the grief. Grief I could hold. The hardest part was not knowing why. Spending 3 years believing it was just random. Just bad luck. Just the universe being careless. She pressed her hands flat on the table. At least now it has a shape. At least now it is something I can look at. I'm sorry, Victor said. Those are completely insufficient words for what I am trying to say. but I am saying them anyway, because I have been unable to say them for 2 years, and I am done being unable." She looked at his face, really looked at it. The coldness that everyone talked about. She could see now that it was not coldness at all. It was the specific stillness of a person who had done something that could not be undone and had been living inside that ever since. She knew that stillness. She had worn it herself for 3 years. "What do you want to do?" she said. "I want to give you everything the lawyers said I couldn't give you," he said. "Not because it fixes anything. It doesn't fix anything. But because you deserve to have had someone say, 'I know what happened, and it should not have happened, and I am sorry, and here is everything I can give you, even though it will never be enough.'" Josephine looked at her hands on the table. She did not cry. She was past the kind of crying that came easily. Oh, but something in her face shifted. Something that had been locked for 3 years, released just slightly. Like a door that has been sealed so long, the frame has warped, but the hinges still work. "I'm not going to quit," she said finally. He blinked. "What?" "I can see on your face that you're expecting me to quit." "I'm not going to." She looked at him steadily. "I am going to need you to tell me everything that is in that file. Every page. Every name. Everything." She paused. "And then I am going to need that real coffee your chef keeps in the cabinet above the refrigerator, because the regular stuff down here is terrible." Victor Crane looked at her for a long moment. And then something happened on his face that his driver and his chef and his assistant and 41 previous maids had never once seen. He smiled. Not a polished smile, but not a practiced one. The small, surprised, completely unguarded smile of a man who had forgotten he still knew how. "The cabinet above the refrigerator," he said. "I've been looking at it for 4 months," she said. He stood up. He went to the cabinet. He made the coffee. He brought 2 cups to the table, sat back down across from her, and opened his mouth. And for the first time in 3 years, Victor Crane began to talk. Really talk. Not perform, not manage, not control. Just talk. And Josephine listened, the way she had always listened, quietly, completely, like someone who understood that some words cost everything the person saying them has left. Outside, the city went dark. Inside the kitchen, the lights stayed on. 2 people at a table with cold truth between them and hot coffee in their hands. Finally, in the same room after 3 years of being just out of reach of each other. It was not a happy ending yet. It was something more honest than that. It was a beginning that knew exactly what it had cost to get there. And it held that cost gently, the way you hold something broken that is still, somehow, worth keeping. If this story reached something inside you, if you believe that the truth, even when it is painful, is always worth finding, share this video right now with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video so more people can find this story. Subscribe and hit the bell, because every single week we bring you stories that stay with you long after they end. And drop in the comments right now, what moment hit you the hardest? Was it the open door on a Tuesday, the word penalty, or the first time Victor smiled? Tell me. I read every single one, and your comment means more than you know.